Oh my god. I had a full other topic that I was going to talk about in today's video. And when I sat down to write the script, I saw people online talking about this photo shoot, which had just dropped, and I absolutely had to talk about this instead. This series is so well done. I literally have something to say about every single photo, and I will. This is photography being used as a political weapon. It is subtle and unsubtle, obvious and deniable. I am so excited, man. Like, this is what photography is for. And okay, I know I'm getting ahead of myself. That was not a proper intro. What I am talking about is this photo shoot and accompanying feature that dropped in Vanity Fair this morning, the morning of December 16th, probably a few days ago by the time I post this video. This set of photos was captured by photographer Christopher Anderson, and it features up-close and personal portraits of members of Trump's core team, as well as some texture shots and some full-body photographs, as well as group shots. In these photos, we have White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, who gave a pretty candid set of interviews. Potentially by accident, she denies having said a lot of the things. Anyway, that's like a whole other topic. We have Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Deputy Chief of Policy Stephen Miller, the Director of Presidential Personnel Office Dan Scavino, and finally, Deputy Chief of Staff for Legislative, Political, and Public Affairs, James Blair. There are so many layers to this photo shoot. I'm gonna do my best to keep this video organized. So first I'm gonna talk about the photographer, Christopher Anderson, who took these photos. I'll tell you about his style and share some of his previous works. And then I'm gonna talk about these photos and why they are so masterfully done, what techniques were employed in each one, and what we can infer from that about the photographer's approach to capturing these figures. I'm going to try and tackle this topic from a strictly photographic perspective. I'm going to try not to editorialize too much with my own political opinions, but of course there's going to be a little bit of that. I can't help it. I'm going to tell you about how this photo shoot was posed, lit, edited, and how these elements come together to paint a picture of Trump's inner circle that is aggressively accurate. Aggressively accurate. So if you like this video, if you find it interesting, you can leave a like. You can subscribe to my channel to see more videos like it. I do put out a fair amount of videos like this. I'm trying to do more of these like long form type things. And you can leave a comment down below letting me know what you think. And I do really like reading the comment section on videos like this because sometimes you guys have insights that I have totally missed, and it's really interesting. So if you have one of those, leave it down below. With all that said, and without further ado, let's jump right in and talk about the photographer. Christopher Anderson is a skilled and talented photographer. And I'm talking talented with a capital T. This guy has the eye. He has the vision. He understands art, okay? He was born in 1970 in Kelowna, which is actually just a few hours away from my hometown, so BC buddies. And he's been producing critically acclaimed photographic works since the late 1990s and early 2000s. His early work was very photojournalistic. He documented conflict zones in Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, and has earned many accolades over the years for his coverage. In 2004, he traveled to Venezuela to document the country under Hugo Chavez and published a photo book of these images titled Capitolio. I looked it up, I wanted to buy it, it's like $500. But some of the photos from Capitolio are available on his former agency's website, and these are a fantastic glimpse at this photographer's approach to the medium of photography. Nothing in the frame is accidental. You can tell, right? Like, he's creating these compositions by noticing every element and then using the composition to highlight or juxtapose what he is seeing. He uses elements like foreground and shadows to piece out his subjects. He uses lines very intentionally. He's got this skewed horizon thing that he uses to emphasize chaos in certain environments. It's a very slight effect, but present in a lot of his work. He went on to work as a contract photographer for National Geographic and News Weekly, and became the first photographer in residence at New York Magazine. And over the course of his decades-long career, his work has spanned several photographic styles and approaches. He does some street photography, celebrity portraiture, still lives, a bit of fashion, he shoots in black and white or in color, and he still does a lot of political and documentary photography. Throughout all of these different ways of approaching the art form that are present in his body of work, the elements that he considers important in a photograph remain consistent. So he's attentive to shadows and lighting, background elements, and especially texture. Anderson's work is very rich in texture. He does not shy away from showing pores and skin texture, wrinkles, film grain, blur, but he uses all of these textures very intentionally. He crafts his image with texture. And this is key, I think, to understanding the Vanity Fair photo shoot, because this characteristic use of texture and shadow in his work is what allowed him to create these photos, and also what provides the plausible deniability that might have been necessary to get them published. So there is an article in The Independent that interviews Christopher Anderson about the Vanity Fair photo shoot, and the thesis statement for this article is basically, despite the public reaction, the photos were not taken to deliberately show the Trump officials' bad sides. That's a direct quote from the article. And it contains some quotes from Christopher Anderson about this photo shoot, and so I will read them to you. He says, "Very close-up portraiture has been a fixture in a lot of my work over the years, particularly political portraits that I've done over the years. I like the idea of penetrating the theater of politics. I know there's a lot to be made with, oh, he is intentionally trying to make people look bad, and that kind of thing. That's not the case. If you look at my photographic work, I've done a lot of close-ups in the same style with people of all political stripes. Above all else, I try to cut through the image that politics want to project and get at something that is more truthful. I see my job doing that as a responsibility to portray what I encounter." The Independent article ends with an account from Anderson about his encounter with Stephen Miller, who came up to him at the end of the photo shoot and said, "You know, you have a lot of power in the discretion you use to be kind to someone in your photographs." And Anderson looks at him and says, "You know, you do too." I assume all of these quotes are taken from like a longer interview with Anderson. These are just the ones that appeared in the article, but I do think it's a good snapshot of his explanation for the photo shoot. You know, he's kind of shrugging and saying, "It's just my signature style." And I think that's part of the genius, because he's not showing something that isn't there. He's not photoshopping anything in, but he is refusing to shy away from showing everything that is there and making decisions in lighting and editing that intentionally highlight unflattering elements. But he's doing so in a way that is so subtle as to still be deniable. And an outlet like The Independent just takes it at face value that the fact that these people look horrible is incidental. It's the consequence of a one-size-fits-all approach to his signature style. Another thing to consider is that these images by Anderson capture people who we almost exclusively see photographed in the most flattering way possible. And I mean, most photography we see is as flattering as possible. Like, people take flattering pictures of themselves, they hire photographers to take flattering pictures. We see flattering pictures online and in magazines and everywhere in our cultural image sphere, right? Our culture is obsessed with physical beauty and will shoehorn it into every portrait, no matter what, regardless of how appropriate it may be. And this emphasis on flattery in photography is generally agreed to be a little bit fake, right? We all agree that the most flattering angle possible is not necessarily the closest approximation of reality. It's not necessarily the most true way to capture somebody. Anderson knows this, and this is his plausible deniability. When he's shrugging his shoulders and giving his explanation, he is saying that we're used to seeing flattery and he's just showing reality. He's trying to cut through the image that politics want to project and get at something that is more truthful. And you know, the implication here is that lighting someone from above, which is a flattering way to light somebody, is misleading, whereas lighting them from like slightly below and dead on, like he's lit these people, is more truthful. And in that case, truth seems a little bit subjective, doesn't it? If I capture someone at 200 millimeters versus 10 millimeters, they're gonna look quite different, but which version is more truthful? I think elements like Photoshop and Facetune prime us to think that the more flattering a photo is, the faker it is. But does that make less flattering photography more truthful by default? Christopher Anderson telling The Independent that he's trying to get at something more truthful, I don't think he's talking about aesthetics, because that doesn't hold up. He's not saying, I want to show what these people truly look like, because we know what they look like. They look like this and this and this and this and this. He's saying, I want to show who these people truly are. He is using his power as a photographer to project a subjective reality while being subtle enough with it to convince people that what they're seeing is objective reality without all of the gloss that we're used to seeing from photography. This is a photographer who has spent 30 years photographing war and conflict and politics and celebrities with carefully crafted attention to texture and shadow and lighting, and he has the opportunity to photograph some of the most destructive people in America. And you think he's not using any of these elements intentionally? Can you imagine if they hired a painter who was known for their intentional use of color to paint one of these people, and they painted a portrait that was just entirely blood red, and then when asked about it, they just said, I was just experimenting with color. It's my style. Oh, actually, that happened with this painting of the King, Charles, and honestly, it's giving the exact same energy. I adore Anderson's execution here. This is the art of photographing reality, right? Reality as seen and understood through the lens of the artist. I'll talk about some of the subtle details in each of these photos pretty quick here that were absolutely intentional, but first I want to show you some other examples from Anderson's portfolio, some portraits taken of other famous politicians, just in case you don't believe me. Right? Somehow, these people do not look diabolical, despite being captured in his signature style. Super close-up, black and white photography, and yet Bernie Sanders looks like a professor giving a lecture, while Stephen Miller looks like Al Capone. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? A photographer photographs you looking like this, and then implies, well, I use the same techniques with you that I used for Obama, so it must be a you thing. Okay, enough about that. Let's talk about the photos. I do not have a subscription to Vanity Fair, so I couldn't read the article, but these photos and some snippets from the article are available on their Instagram, and the magazine will be available in stores on January 20th. But in the meantime, these photos are presented on Instagram in sets. So for each person you get a portrait, a short bio, another photo, and then a quote. And the quotes they present in these slides are expertly chosen. I mean, the whole layout here and presentation is fantastic, and the comment section on these Instagram posts is boom. Oh my god, my voice is already almost gone. I haven't even started talking about the photos yet. Sorry this video is going to be so long. Starting strong, probably the best of the worst, here is 28-year-old White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, who Vanity Fair titles The Mouthpiece. She is photographed so closely that we can see the injection scars on her lips, the fall off of her mascara, the mismatched pigment in her eyebrows, and the contour on her nose. Trauma. Like, a photo like this would inflict so much psychological damage. Can you imagine? This photo is taken also with such a narrow depth of field that the tip of her nose is out of focus, making it look longer and more prominent than usual, which is a particularly aggressive move given how much effort she puts into contouring her nose to look smaller. She is photographed with a cold temperature light, which makes her skin look absolutely ghastly, and I think there's actually more than one light temperature hitting her. Different lighting temperatures will emphasize different undertones in the skin, and usually in photography, we want to keep the lighting temperatures as consistent as possible because mismatched temperatures will emphasize like a bunch of different colors, and it winds up making the skin look colorful in a way that we associate with disease. Like if you have orangish skin with a green undertone and a purple under eye, it's gonna look a little bit unsettling, and the lighting in this picture really emphasizes that. It almost gives the impression that she is wearing like a mask of human skin. We don't see the life underneath her skin at all because of the sickly green pallor that is 100% an effect of the lighting and editing. You can see the lighting actually reflected in her eyes, and I think this proves my point because she's taking a beauty dish straight on, like slightly below eye level, which is honestly a cruelty in itself, and it looks like it's a slightly warmer temperature, judging by the catch light, than the light coming at her from above, which seems to be a large octobox with a colder light. A bunch of these portraits are lit this way, all to great effect. Very diabolical. The second photo of her is a full body photograph, and it is taken right at eye level, which go watch my video on politics and angles if you want to understand why this is a choice. Again, it is taken with multiple lighting colors. We have the warm lamps on in the background behind her, and apparently the room lights are on as well, judging by the orangish cast in the shadows on her face and hair. And then we have a low-powered strobe hitting her at a Rembrandt kind of angle, again at a colder temperature. The strobe illuminates the corner of the painting behind her, and you can see that it's a really cheap print, right? Like it's on this shiny material and it's curling slightly, and the Instagram account Diet Prada actually clocked this print as a $12 Walmart special. Now, I don't know if this is the Walmart version, but it is a cheap print nonetheless, and we can tell because of how this photo was lit. Next up, we have Dan Scavino, the Deputy Chief of Staff and Director of Presidential Personnel, and he's photographed from the side to show his historical inspired haircut, let's say that. This photo is not so bad. Honestly, this one's like very passable. But then we have this second photo where he's making an expression like a cartoon character, and the horizontal lines in the photograph are slightly skewed in the same direction as his eyebrows, which gives the whole office this slightly unbalanced appearance. This could be a perfectly symmetrical composition. And we know that people who are photographing politicians love to use symmetry, right? Like, political offices are often symmetrical. It's really easy to make them look symmetrical, and symmetry gives this feeling of balance and control, and we are very obviously not doing that. Everything is slightly out of place in the background. The bushes behind him are in different positions on the desk. The painting is hung slightly off-center. You could fix this just by slightly adjusting the angle from which you're photographing, unless, of course, you're trying to make this look unbalanced on purpose. We see this skewed use of horizontal lines throughout this photo series. We have these texture shots that are all slightly skewed, and most of the full body shots are slightly skewed as well. And the impression of this effect is that the building itself is reacting to the people working within it. Next up, we have Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, and this photo is crazy. Like, what is going on with his pores? It almost looks like UV photography. I'm pretty sure it's not, but this is clarity and texture slider abuse for sure. And if I were to guess, I would say that Anderson has increased the saturation and decreased the illumination of just the red tones to really emphasize the pores and wrinkles on his face. You can kind of see this from the dark black mark on his forehead, right? It's not a freckle or a mole. It's not there in other photos. I think it's like a scab or an acne nick or something that would be red, but it appears dark black because of the treatment that has been done to this photo. While we're looking at his forehead, getting this up close and personal, we can see evidence of his hair transplant with some of these stray follicles, which, like, I love gender affirming care as much as the next person. I'm all for it, you go do it. But some of these people seem to have a real issue with it, so I just thought I'd point it out. Apparently JD Vance literally offered the photographer $1,000 to make Marco Rubio look as bad as possible. Like, he probably did it as a joke, but it really seems like Christopher Anderson took him up on the offer, and I hope he got his bag out of this one, because job well done. Back to Rubio, we can see from the catchlight in his eye that the beauty dish is placed slightly below eye level. And Photography 101 teaches us to never underlight our subjects, because so rarely in nature would you have light coming from below. So our brains are trained to see uplighting as being unnatural and distorted. But the uplighting here is done so slightly that it just barely triggers that response in the viewer, but not so much that it's actually perceptible. And as you have seen, we can do a little bit of detective work and deduce how these photos were lit based on the reflections of the lights in the eyes. That's called the catch light. And you can see the reflections of the lights, see how they're positioned, and make assumptions about why. Noticeably, we do not see a catch light in the eyes of Stephen Miller. Now, Miller is, I think, one of the most dangerous people in the Trump administration. Maybe the most dangerous. A lot of these other people are political opportunists and social climbers, right? JD Vance is like the patron saint of Republican social climbers. And I feel like a lot of these Trump officials are like this, right? They would just kind of go along with anything as long as it gives them a leg up in their careers. Not to editorialize too much here. But Miller, I think, actually has a political agenda. He is in politics for something other than clout and money. And he has been the architect of, or at least the impetus behind, many of the Trump administration's most fascist policies. Now, in Photography 101, we are taught to always include catchlights in people's eyes, because eyes are the gateway to the soul, and bright eyes show liveliness, and sometimes I will even Photoshop catchlights in if I happen to light the subject in a way that doesn't show them. Without a catchlight, eyes will look dead and soulless and empty. So why do you think Stephen Miller is the only one photographed without a catchlight in his eyes? This is a loud message that only a photographer would catch. This photo actually looked really familiar to me. Like, I thought he looked like an old-timey gangster, and it turns out that it is almost a one-to-one recreation of Al Capone's mugshot. The lighting, angle of approach, tilt of his head, and expression are identical. The only difference is that the Al Capone shot has these beautiful catchlights that are somehow completely missing from the Miller shot. So conspicuously that I wonder if they were shopped out. Anderson did not go out of his way to make Miller look ugly in these photos. He just gave him the shark eyes. And I'm so sorry, but I do have a short tangent for you. It's not going to be a long tangent, I promise. But in fascism, the role of aesthetics and attractiveness cannot be understated, okay? It's crazy how many successful fashion houses have sprung up from fascist origins because so much of fascist ideology is focused on aggrandizement through aesthetic perfection, this obsession with beauty as a path to godliness. Fascist regimes might run their citizens ragged with terror and war, but tout out attractive citizens as proof that it's all worth it in the end. And of course, it is the state that defines what is attractive and uses this as a cudgel to enact terror on those who fall outside of that definition. Attractiveness as an excuse to control and punish, almost like it's about the state's control over the body and not about the physical qualities of the body itself. In this sense, attractiveness is a cardboard cutout of an ideological goal behind which the true intentions of fascism, being control, manipulation, and power, lurk. And here we have this portrait of Stephen Miller looking like a cardboard cutout of a decent-looking man with these dark shark eyes behind it. Wow, what a good way to photograph a fascist. Especially since Anderson has captured everyone else looking unhinged and unattractive, and yet he's allowed Miller's outward presentation to remain intact while drawing attention to these dead shark eyes. Editing Yvonne here, I missed a detail in the Miller shots, and I have to point it out. Christopher Anderson actually posted this reel to his Instagram, accompanied by a song that just says, America, over and over again, and he's zooming in on the painting behind Miller, which portrays an idyllic vision of pre-colonial America, with indigenous folks going about their day. It is a memory of what came before Miller and his regime, and what was destroyed to eventually make way for it. I can't believe I missed that the first time around. Anderson really dislikes Miller, man. Like, the Miller portrait was also the only shot that made it onto his personal Instagram page. He clearly sees this one as being particularly poignant compared to the others, and I agree. Moving on to the portraits of J.D. Vance, and on the topic of catch lights, I guess, the lights in his eyes are present but very weak, despite the fact that he is being lit from straight on, the same as the other ones. You'd think that he would have a big beauty dish donut reflection right in the middle of his eyes like the other portraits do, and yet he doesn't. Was it intentionally removed? Who can say? J.D. Vance got absolutely annihilated by this meme earlier this year, and I low-key feel like his portrait is a callback to that. We have cropped out the borders of his face so that it kind of pours off of the sides of the photo, making him look wider and rounder than he actually is. He's also shot with a very shallow depth of field, leaving the tip of his nose out of focus so it appears longer and more protuberant. And again, we have this clarity slider abuse that highlights every single pore. Then there is a full body portrait of him standing beside the vice presidential flag, and it is lit in a way that the flag casts a shadow over him. It's an interesting visual metaphor given the fact that he gave up his entire political identity for the vice presidential appointment. It's almost like he's being overshadowed by his career. And I think this photo is the only one in the entire feature where the horizontal lines are straight. Right? They are completely level with the bottom of the photograph. I'm not sure what to make of that. I don't really have any inversions? I can't really infer anything. What is that word that I'm looking for? Inferences. I don't really have any inferences to make from that, but if you do, let me know in the comment section down below. Next up, we have James Blair, the only Trump teammate who got away without a horrifying close-up. And I don't have many things to say about these photos. The skewed horizontal lines, the heavy shadows, the two-faced implication made by photographing him through a mirror. But notably, these photos are lit in a way that shows that the wall behind him has been patched and repainted, maybe a few times, right? And we have scented candles visible on the table, some loose wires popping out of the fixture below, and from these elements, we get the impression that this is a hastily occupied space. The White House is crumbling, and here are some hasty, insufficient efforts to cover it up. We see more imperfections in the rooms in other photos as well, things that a photographer would usually be inclined to avoid photographing or would Photoshop out. In the full body photo of Susie Wiles, we see the bottom of the door frame looking banged up and a staffer taking a call in the next room over, as though this photo shoot was just kind of squeezed in wherever it could fit, adding to the haphazard vibe that this entire set gives. And it's a good metaphor, because I'm sure Wiles is actually squeezing this photo shoot in. I'm sure she has a very busy schedule, as I understand she's doing a lot of the legwork in holding up the administration. Susie Wiles is the White House Chief of Staff. She is the first woman to hold this title, so yay. And she actually gave a tell-all interview to the author of the article that accompanies these photos. Maybe accidentally. That's actually the real news story. Like, these photos are really fun and I'm talking about them, but all the political commentators are talking about Susie Wiles's accidental tell-all. So go and look that up if you want to hear her unfiltered opinions on all of the White House staff members that she's essentially been babysitting for the last year. And that babysitter role is probably why we have her sitting in the middle of this group photo, looking haggard. And we have a portrait of her as well, taken with the same lighting as Caroline Leavitt's close-up. And this photo, in my opinion, is a little bit more generously cropped. Her features don't pour off the edge of the page like Vance's and Leavitt's do. This photo is still horrid, right? But I feel like the photographer is giving her maybe a little more grace than the others. We can still see the lip injection scars though. And I think drawing attention to these aesthetic interventions, let's call them, that these people have had kind of ties into what I was saying about fascism's obsession with aesthetics. All of this pomp and gloss, you know, the makeup, the lip injections, the hair transplant, blah, 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 is an effort to cover up something uglier underneath. These are aesthetic interventions that are being made to conceal inner ugliness. I am of two minds on that, okay? This is my commentary on the whole photo shoot now. We're getting close to wrapping up. When Anderson says that he is trying to cut through the image that politics want to project to get at something more truthful, and he's showing these people looking as ugly as possible, right? And leaving in evidence that they are trying to cover up what they perceive as flaws. I am interpreting this as Anderson saying, these people are actually bad, and so they're actually ugly. But I think equating ugliness with evilness, these people are bad, and so I'm going to make them look as bad as possible, this is ultimately reinforcing the fascist understanding of beauty as goodness, right? And is that not the Maha movement in a nutshell? That's a whole other tangent for another day. Out of all of these close-up portraits, I honestly prefer Miller's because he wasn't made to look ugly intentionally. He was just made to look evil, right? And I think that's the right approach. But having said that, I completely understand the compulsion as a photographer to point out flaws in people who obviously place great value on aesthetic beauty. You're hitting them where it hurts. You're making it personal. Some of these are very personally offensive, right? And I don't think Miller would hate his portrait, but I'm sure Leavitt is livid about hers. And when you have a group of people who are doing so much damage to the country that you live in and the world at large in so many ways, I can't blame you for taking the opportunity to deal some psychological damage in return, even if it means playing their game to some extent. So I'm of two minds. I know that it is wrong to equate ugliness with badness, perhaps counterproductive, but I also love this photo shoot and everything about it, and I bow to Christopher Anderson's masterful ability to make use of this opportunity. I think that's a good place to leave things. Thank you all for watching. I hope this video was interesting. I hope you learned a thing or two about how not to photograph people, if you like them. Or also how to interpret photography in the same way that we are taught to interpret literature. Both are forms of art, and I think there's a lot of value to be had at studying art as art. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you did, you can leave a comment down below. Love to hear from you. I will be back, hopefully at the end of the month with another video, but possibly early January. But hopefully at the end of December. And of course, remember to stay sharp and don't forget to keep shooting. Bye guys.